That is me. All right, so yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to present a toolkit that I've been working on over the years for sort of dealing with getting a bunch of new scope. Actually, before I dive in, I'd love to just get a sense of who's in the audience. How many folks in the audience are individual contributors who are aspiring to be eng managers one day? All right, maybe about 5–10%. How many are already engineering managers but are line managers, so not necessarily managing other managers yet? All right, looks like about half maybe. And how many are managing other managers? All right, about the rest of the group. Awesome, well, that means most of you have already sort of had to deal with your first getting new scope. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my career thus far and sort of how I've gotten new scope over the years. And then I'll get into some of the lessons. So just real quickly, my career, I started at Facebook just out of college. Facebook was in its late startup days. I was an early engineer on the Facebook ads team, and then I became an eng manager while at Facebook. After about 3.5 years, I left for Dropbox to become an eng manager there and ended up scaling up a team to about 170 engineers, and then moved to Segment, which was my first executive role as the VP of engineering, joining the team in the early Series B days. In terms of new scope, I'm going to define it as one of three things. It's either a promotion to a new role, so this happened to me at Facebook and at Dropbox. It can be moving to a new company where you have to build trust with people because you're working with them for the first time, or it can be taking on new teams. And actually this happened to me a couple times at Segment. I took on the security team and then recently the product and design teams as well. And in all of those cases, I think there's a common toolkit you need to use to handle this new scope gracefully. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I call this the trust toolkit. There we go. And I think it's really about building trust. That's what you need to do when you find yourself in a new role. You have all of these other stakeholders. There could be direct reports. They could be your manager. They could be your peers. They could be the founders. It can be a lot of different people. And as you need to build trust with those folks, I've found that I need to do three things really well. I need to listen, and listen for much longer than I expect to need to listen for. I need to dig in. I need to do the unsexy things that may seem beneath me so that I can really earn that trust. And I need to ask for the answers. People are happy to give you the answers of what they're looking for as long as you ask. So let's start with the first one. Listen. So I think the big surprise for me about listening is just how long you have to listen. I find that if you are making any decisions before about 3 months, you are not listening enough, and you're likely to burn some bridges. And actually, I have a story about this. When I first moved from Facebook to Dropbox, this was back in 2012, so I had been an eng manager of maybe 3 or 4 folks at Facebook, and I moved over to Dropbox to be an eng manager for the growth team and the Dropbox for Business team. And when I did this, I wasn't kind of cued into the whole listen idea. And in fact, I took a lot of the stuff I had learned at Facebook and I just started to try to immediately apply it. So Facebook is very, very famous for their cultural value, move fast and break things, which has since been replaced. But this was very much the heyday of move fast and break things. It was a go, go, go environment. We were encouraged to always be building, always be iterating. Didn't really matter if we were like doing exactly the right thing, as long as we were moving quickly. That was what was valued. And so I took that. Facebook had been my first job. I assumed that every company operates this way. And I went to Dropbox. And so I came in pretty hot at Dropbox. I had a lot of ideas. I really wanted to impress people. I knew from Facebook that you impress people by just iterating insanely quickly. I was on the growth team, so it felt especially reasonable to be experimenting a lot and really driving crazy fast on things. And I have one particular memory of an experiment I wanted to run. It was a pretty common experiment. This is taking the call to action button for Dropbox for Business and turning it green. It was like a sort of muted color, and I wanted to test what if we turned it green. This is kind of a silly growth hack type experiment. It's a pretty common place to start. It takes about a day to run this test and then maybe a couple weeks to collect the data. And so, I sort of did what I would do at Facebook is I barged ahead without bothering to really get permission. And it came across to the co-founders and especially Arash, the CTO, as very sloppy work. which I think was fair. And I think what I had missed is I didn't realize that Dropbox has a different cultural value. Dropbox's value is literally sweat the details, which is about the polar opposite of move fast and break things. And so I was very quickly sort of moving against myself, or against my trust with the founders by doing what I thought was right. And it's because I hadn't actually taken the time to stop and listen. So about 3 months in, I was actually in a pretty bad spot. I really had lost the trust of one of the co-founders, and good luck getting anything done if you don't have the trust of the co-founders. And so I really had to do a pretty hard reset. So I ended up asking the co-founder, I had sensed that this was happening, and I asked him, what can I do to earn your trust, or what's bothering you? And Arash had this pet peeve about bad CSS. And so I spent about 2 months going around the settings pages. This is a screenshot I pulled about a week ago. This is a page I built about 6 years ago. It hasn't changed. We made the CSS on this thing perfect, according to Arash. So it was me, Arash, and a designer. And I just swept through dozens and dozens of settings pages that got barely any traffic. I'm not sure it was like the greatest use of anyone's time, if I'm being honest. But this was the thing that rebuilt the trust with Arash. And it was from listening to what was important, what the company valued, that really helped me sort of start to navigate. So my tactical tips here around listening, you have a whole bunch of people around you when you grab this new scope. It could be new reports, it could be your boss, it could be your peers. Whoever it is, listen to what they actually care about, and really spend a lot of time in that listening mode. Spend a good 3 months. If you can afford to do so, maybe spend 6 months before you make any serious decisions. It's a little frustrating as you're actually doing it, but I think it's really the right way to kick off a relationship and build trust. All right, my second tip, dig in. I think digging in is probably one of the most emotionally challenging parts of the journey. So I did a little bit better this time than my first story, moving from Dropbox to Segment. I'd sort of learned the listen set of learnings, but I don't think I was emotionally prepared for how hard it would be to actually dig in for a solid 3-6 months. So a little bit of context before I hop right into the story. When I left Dropbox, this is roughly what the org looked like. I had 4 directors of engineering reporting to me, and then about 170 engineers under that. Obviously, it was a little bit more complicated. Orgs never look quite this simple, but this was the gist of the org. And then this is what my org looked like literally 2 weeks later when I joined Segment, late November 2015. I was a line manager again, and I had 10 engineers, no engineering managers. There were some product managers, but they had never done any project management before. We had never really had a concept of accountability, I learned, so we had to layer in some of that. And it was just a very, very different situation. And obviously, it's not that the founders had lied to me as I was getting recruited. I knew what I was getting into, but I don't think I was emotionally ready for what I was getting into. But instead of charging ahead with what I thought was the right thing to do, I decided to learn from that first lesson and listen. And so I asked a particular question. I asked, what can I do to help? This is a very key question. You might not like the answer that you get to this question, but if you ask this question, you can avoid the month or 2 punishment of tweaking CSS on the settings pages that no one ever views. So I asked, where are the gaps? What's the help you need? What can I do? How can I spend my time to make this go forward? And it turned out that sort of accountability, project management, having a line manager EM was what they needed, and we actually worked together for 3 months, much more sort of collaboratively than the engineering team had ever worked together before to ship a new product, Cloud App Sources, which we shipped a couple years ago at this point. And I think this was not at all what I expected to be doing in my first 3 months. I had been doing a very strategic role at Dropbox, like product strategy, recruiting strategy, thinking about complex, nuanced people issues, and I was kind of back to being a line manager. And it sort of felt like I had taken, a couple years rewind in my career. But I think this was absolutely the right way to spend my first couple months at Segment, because I built an immense amount of trust with the co-founders, with the leadership, that I was happy to do whatever it took to make Segment succeed. So pretty different from what I was expecting, but I think it was the right way to spend the time. So my specific tactical tips here: ask what you can do to help. This is the key question. If you're doing work that feels beneath you or is a little emotionally draining, that's okay. That actually probably means you're doing this thing correctly. It won't last forever, but it can be a little bit emotionally trying for the first couple of months. And I think this is especially important if you're going from a bigger company to a smaller company, because that company is going to have problems that are problems that you probably dealt with a couple years ago, but they're going to have them and they're going to need your help to solve them. But I think it's also actually true when you're going to bigger companies, because this advice is really about building that trust, much more so than it is about getting the maximal amount of impact in the first couple of months, because you can't have that impact until you've built the trust. All right, and then my third lesson, this one's a little bit weirder, but I have this concept of asking for the answers. Let me just dive right into what I mean by this. So I took this intro class at Harvard back in freshman year. Harvard has tortured decades of people with this horrible class called Expos 20. It's Introduction to Expository Writing. I really hated this class. I think I hated this class mostly because of this guy right here. This was my preceptor, which is a very fancy Harvard word for teacher. And this guy was very hard to work with. I would sort of ask him for feedback on my essays, try to get his thoughts, figure out if my outline was in the right direction. And he would always say, sorry, I can't give you the answers. It would be unfair. I'll let you know when I grade it. And I actually think this is it's not this guy's fault. This is what he was told to do. I actually think this is a broader problem in academia, which you have sort of this slightly adversarial relationship with your teachers, because at the end of the day, they need to grade you. So they can't actually give you the answers. They can sort of help you so far, and then you're on your own to figure the rest out. So industry is very different, and I think it's taken me a while to adjust. But in industry, it's totally cool to ask for the answers, because everyone's sort of on the same team, and people are totally happy to help you. They're happy to tell you exactly what they're looking for. And so I think that's a huge advantage that you can leverage, that it's taken me a while to sort of piece together. So the third story is taking on new responsibility at Segment. So about 2 or 3 months ago, I was asked to take on the product team in addition to the engineering team. And this was sort of the case of a new team. It was a new team I had never really worked with, a new function, a new discipline I had never really worked on. And so I found myself a little bit lost. I wasn't sure exactly how to handle this. I don't know what a bunch of the things I'm supposed to be producing look like. And I think that's where asking for the answers is really critical. So we had this sort of meme, and we still have this meme, this age-old question floating around: what's the product strategy? So the sales team wants to know what's the product strategy, the success team wants to know, the marketing team wants to know. Basically everyone wants to know what the product strategy was. And I don't have a great mental model or toolkit right now for exactly what a product strategy looks like. So I started trying to ask for the answers. And in particular, I went to the VP of sales and asked him, what would a good product strategy look like to you? Can you show me what format it would be and who we'd show it to? I asked the same question to the VP of marketing. I asked the same question to the VP of success. I asked my engineering team. I started asking all around. And I kind of pieced together that there were 3 things that people were looking for. There were actually 3 different sort of docs and deliverables. The first was the sales team wanted better Kool-Aid for showing to prospects. So they wanted these incredibly inspiring long-term stories. They didn't really care how real they were, but that's the thing they really needed. The success team wanted a tactical roadmap. So they have all these customers. They want to say we are committing to you that in Q2 we're going to deliver this, Q3 we're going to deliver this, Q4 we're going to deliver that. And then what the marketing team and the eng product and design teams really needed was an 18 to 24 month sort of product strategy type roadmap, so a general idea of what the big things we're tackling, so that the various teams can align around it, so that the infrastructure teams can be building ahead for what's coming, so that the marketing teams can sequence their go-to-market strategy based on that. And so this was like a very eye-opening experience. This was actually not sort of my impression of what the various, well, I had really no idea what the teams needed when I first heard this question. But I spent about a week just asking folks for the answers, and I got a much clearer picture. So this third one is still challenging though, 18 to 24 month product strategy doc. So what I did next was I put together a document. I put together what I call a 10% draft, meaning this is a semi-finished document. And just sort of started asking for feedback. And I got a ton of feedback. I got comment after comment after comment. I probably got about 50 comments on this doc. It was like a little internal flame war that I started. And that was really exciting to me because at least we were talking about specifics and we were getting great feedback and we were starting to adjust. We actually decided that we needed a product offsite to spend a whole day talking about this further. This actually just happened this past Wednesday. It was a great day. And now I feel like we're prepared to sort of build the next version of this doc. I'm hoping to get this doc to an 80% draft. But I think this is really asking for, like, is this roughly what you're looking for? Is this along the right lines? It's okay to tell me if it's not. If I'm totally like on the wrong page, please let me know so I can go fix it. But this is sort of this iterative process where I ask people, like, if this looks like the answer that they're looking for, and they'll tell me yes or no, and then I get to keep iterating. So my tactical tips here, I think industry is very different than academia. You can actually get people to tell you the answers. I almost never spend more than 2 hours working on something without getting feedback on it and saying, is this roughly the answer you're looking for? Including this talk, I spent about 2 hours in the first draft and sent it to a bunch of the Plato folks to get feedback on it. I would say consider using a 10%, 80% final framework so that you can get early feedback on things. I think labeling a doc as 10% done is a great way to sort of disarm your reviewers to give you lots of feedback and then also not get too attached to the doc yourself. And then I think the hard part, of course, is actually listening to all the feedback you get. This whole framework does not work at all if you ask for the answers but then you ignore what you hear. You will not always like what you're told, but I do think it's really important to get into that iterative motion with your teams. All right, so to recap the lessons, listen. I think listening is about listening for much longer than you think seems reasonable. It's like an exercise of patience for me when I start a new role or start working with a new team. Digging in, and I think this is also an exercise of patience, and I think this can feel like you're doing work that's beneath you or not the work you really want to be doing. And then finally, asking for the answers. People will be more than happy to just give them to you. All you need to do is ask. All right, thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it over to, do I have time for a quick Q&A?
Yep,
all right.
Thank you, Tido. Again, if you want to participate as part of the QA, just go to the browser, sli.do. The event name is Elevate 2018. The Wi-Fi password, again, is lowercase Plato Elevate. The first question is, do you think waiting for 3 months to make your first decision in a move-fast culture company like Facebook would be well perceived?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I don't think it's like you literally sit on your hands for 3 months and don't do anything. But I do think some of the bigger decisions about team structure, decisions that affect people's careers, some of those higher stakes decisions, certainly I would say waiting 3 months on those. But yeah, that 3 months is not about completely sitting on your hands. I think asking what you can do to help and starting to get some of that stuff done quickly is really important as well, that digging in step. So yeah, I would say the 3 months is really about the bigger decisions. But I do think it's pretty tone deaf often with teams, even if you have the right decisions in mind. If you start coming in guns a-blazing without really like asking questions, I think you are gonna burn a lot more trust, and you're gonna, maybe you make the decision a little bit faster, but then you spend a bunch of time rebuilding that trust with the people who are like, who's this person and why are they making decisions so quickly? So yeah, even in a move fast, break things environment, I think it's the right thing to do. And I think you can expend that energy in the dig in phase.
Next question. How do you encourage feedback from more introverted team members?
Ooh, good question. I think it's really about building trust with the person first. So I can ask all of the right questions and be like as coaxing as humanly possible. But if I haven't actually spent time to build that trust beforehand, no matter what tactics I use in a one-on-one or wherever it is. And building trust can be different with a lot of people. I think some people want a little bit more of a social bond with you. I think other folks want to see you sort of get into the trenches with them and like really help them think through a problem. Yeah, I think that like that's a pretty good one, and a common one I'll do is like I'll actually like dive in and solve a problem alongside of them. And I think like the process of us like solving a problem or doing a project together is a great way to build trust. But I think, yeah, it's really, I don't even try to ask a lot of the questions of how folks are feeling. Well, I'll ask them, but I don't expect to get honest answers or fully honest answers until I've also spent the time to sort of navigate the trust relationship with them.
Follow-up question to that. How do you assess how much trust you have from your team members?
Good question. It's one of those more of an art than a science type things. I would say, I think it's like I'm asking myself, have I been through stuff with this person? Have we made it out the other side? Have we overcome adversity together? Do I feel like I get them and I'm starting to hear their real career hopes, dreams, desires? Am I being completely honest with them about where I think they stand? Because it's like a two-way street. I'm not going to say in our very first one-on-one like an incredibly blunt assessment of how everything is going, but I'm going to wait until 2 or 3 or 4 one-on-ones into it where I'm starting to feel comfortable really like laying out all of my cards to them. So it's kind of, yeah, how much have I told them? How much have we worked together? How much do they seem to be telling me? Does it seem like a complete picture of what they're actually hoping for or dreaming about? And once I've started to like show my cards a bunch and I feel like I'm starting to get a more complete picture, that's when I feel like the trust is there. And then all of the tactical one-on-one stuff around how are you feeling, what are you hoping to work on next, all of that stuff gets way, way easier.
With that, I'd like to conclude our session and thanks our speaker, Tido.
Thank you, everyone.